Hey guys, hope you're all okay. Welcome back to another video. And it's about time, but I'm going to put lights in my 1938 tube stock by EFE. And I thought I'd just run you through quickly what I'm doing and how I'm wiring it up. So hopefully this will be of some use to a lot of you, because I know there are a few people out there who have been asking me for this video. I'm not going to go into massive detail. I'm not going to sit there filming my every move like I would usually, because it just takes too long. And it means that a couple hours job will take probably 4 or 5. But yeah, so stay tuned and I'll show you roughly how you get on with it, and fingers crossed we'll have a nice looking tube train at the end. So here is an unmolested 38 stock then. What you'll need is a 1mm drill bit for the tail lamps, a 1.5mm drill bit for the headlamps, and a scalpel or Stanley knife. So first of all, what you want to do is, handily the new chassis is plastic, which means that you can cut the lenses off with a scalpel. So you just want to cut just the red part off, which will leave you with a squared off end. That'll make it a lot easier to drill into, because they are sort of domed. So if you try and drill into those, your drill bit's going to wander and you won't get it in the center, or if you're very lucky you might, but it's a lot easier if you just chop them off first. Just be very careful with a sharp blade. Obviously, as I said a minute ago, a 1mm drill bit through those. That'll be the right sort of size that you want to leave enough meat for the actual lenses themselves. For the headlamps, you want a 1.5mm drill bit. Just go through those, and once you've gone through the body, make sure you go through a little bit further, because that will just leave an imprint into the actual chassis behind, so you'll know where the lamps go, because we want to do it so that you can remove the body without a load of wiring snagging. So there we are then, there's one with the holes drilled out. You can see the 1mm holes in the tail lamps and 1.5 for the headlamps. I did kind of go a bit overboard on this centre one, but it's nothing that can't be sorted. You won't really notice that by the time I've got some glue and glaze in there for lenses, so it should be fine. So you can now see what I meant by go through a bit extra with the drill bit, because it leaves an imprint of where you actually need to place the LEDs. So you can see the 4 holes in the chassis and the seating block, and that will be a nice little guide for us for where to stick them. So what I do now is, depending on what way you do it, you can obviously fit the tail lamps first, which is a bit more straightforward, or you can fit the headlamps. What I would do with the headlamps is get a soldering iron. You're going to need one anyway, so hopefully you've got one for this project. And I would use the tip of the soldering iron just to increase the size of this indent. And then I also would drag the tip across to the next hole, do the same on that one as well, and then on this one drag it across. You basically want to use your soldering iron to create a channel that the wires can sit in, so that they can come across and then into this sort of indent area here. I suppose before this you probably want to undo the seating unit so that you can pull it out separately. So obviously pull the Plux 22 decoder off. Then you've got 4 screws in the socket. You've got a screw at each end, and then you've got these 2 screws in the center. Once they're all out, you need to sort of prise the seat unit up a little bit, because where these screws go into, the sort of housing for them kind of sits in the seat unit a bit and holds it in place. So it might be a little bit stuck. So once you've got the seating unit loose, obviously your decoder socket will be loose. You then want to poke the decoder socket through the hole that's underneath it. It does fit out of the hole, and then you can pull the seat unit away. What you might need to do is, if you've done what I've done here, where you've got the speaker under the seat and you've just got the wires coming out here, you just need to desolder those wires quickly, just so that they're free, and that'll allow you again to pull it all apart. So there we go with all the screws out, and handily my seating unit has pulled straight off without getting stuck on those centre lugs, unlike the other car that I've done, which actually, now that I think about it, make sure you do these one at a time, because then you've always got one to go back to if you're confused on where the screws go or how anything else goes. So it's quite a handy little sort of thing that you've got 2 of them. But yeah, as I was saying, this socket, if you're careful, it will poke through that hole just by twisting it like that, and then away comes your seats. Obviously I had disconnected the speaker wires, as you saw, and you can see the little speakers set underneath there. So with the rear lights, what I'm going to do is basically glue 2 pre-wired red SMDs in on the back of the lenses, and then I'm going to run them along here to this sort of cavity, and around this kind of area is where I'm going to put the little resistor board that I use, because you do need to put a 1000 ohm resistor at least on each set of LEDs. So, well, each sort of colour and function, if you like, if that makes any sense. So what I do is I use one resistor for both red LEDs. I'll use another resistor for all of the white lights at the front, and then I'll have probably another resistor spare for when I eventually put cab light in, and so on. And then you, from that resistor board, you run one single wire across the feed of each, and that will run straight back to the V plus, or plus V, can't remember what round it is, I can't see it. There you go, plus V, see at the bottom right there, that runs to that. So that just gives you an idea. And what I do is I use a little bit of actually Tamiya masking tape, it's excellent for this, just to secure the wires down. Rather than glue the wires to the chassis, it means that if you've got any problems in the future, you can quite easily get it all apart. So back onto the front lights then, you'll notice I've taped the seat unit to the work mat. Ignore that, it's just so that I can do it one-handed without it moving everywhere and hold the camera at the same time. But basically, to get the position for the LEDs, put your soldering iron in like that. It creates a nice sort of hole. The beauty of doing it like this as well is rather than drill it out, it'll actually be more likely to just push the hole further back, because you're just melting the plastic. Basically, it'll just come out of the back rather than you just creating a hole. It'll just be more of an indent. But you basically want 3 sort of decent sized holes there like that. And then what I would do from here, obviously make sure you clean your soldering iron, because you don't want molten plastic over it. So just come along with the Stanley, take the extra plastic off. You can see there it leaves you with 3 nice sort of indents. Now, as I was saying earlier, I come across the front to create a sort of channel with the soldering iron, and that's what allows your wires to run through and means that the body will clip back on again after you've done this. So to do that, literally quickly poke your soldering iron in the hole and then just slowly drag like this. And there's one. There's 2. This one is a bit of a pain because you've got to decide whether to go across to this one or down to this one. So what I did on the previous one that I did is I went down here diagonally, because if you go across, then you're going to have wires behind that LED in this hole, and that's going to affect it sitting flush. So I'll come across there and then I'll go down onto this one. Just make sure they're deep enough and there's no bits of rubbish in there. It probably seems like a bit of a weird way of doing things, but there is method to the madness. Then you want to come along again after and just clean it all up. It's easier if you go across, but obviously I'm one-handed, so I'll just do that off camera and show you what it looks like. So there you go, you can see now I've run across it with a blade just to take the excess off, and you can now see the channels that we are using to run the LEDs wires into. So obviously the LEDs sit in the holes and the wires go in the channels. It's going to be very fiddly from here on getting the LEDs into those holes and to stay in there, especially with the wires staying in the channels. But just stick with it, take your time, because you want to get this as flush as possible so that it doesn't cause you problems with the body going back on. These are the LEDs that I'm going to use for this project. They are 0603 pre-wired SMDs, and they are warm white in colour to match the sort of lighting that was found on these. You don't want bright white. They will work, but it will look a bit too sort of modern, if you like. However, if you do have bright white LEDs and you don't want to sort of spend the money on some warm white ones extra, you can get some Tamiya clear yellow paint and tint the LEDs with that, or tint the back of the lenses. The rear lights, I use the same type of LEDs You can use 0603s, but I believe I've got 0402s because that's just what they had in stock at the time. They didn't have this size. So 402s are the same sort of thing, but they're slightly smaller again. So this is the size. So you get 603s, which are this size, 402s, which are slightly smaller. Again, with the size, 402s will generally be a little bit dimmer, but in this application, you won't really notice the difference. So if you are already effing and blinding and thinking that it's been fiddly so far, now is the worst bit of the job. So you need to now put in your LEDs. So fill the channels with some super glue. Don't want to go too mad, and put some in the hole as well. You then want to take your pre-wired LED, SND, sorry. You want to poke the SND in the hole, and then you want to run the wires along the channel. It's kind of hard to do this while holding the camera. I nearly had it there, just to show you. It's not really going to play ball, is it? So you want it to sit like that in the channel. You see the wire in there? Obviously the SMD is not quite in the hole because of the angle, but that kind of gives you the idea. So you want to do that with all three. Obviously these bottom two will be a bit more difficult because you've got to run one down this channel and then run this one over the top. But another top tip that I would give you is when you've got one in, get a little bit of that Tamiya masking tape again and go over the channel that you've done to kind of help seal it off so that it can't pull out, because otherwise you'll move it around, the wires will get knocked and it'll rip it out of the channel. So that will save you a lot of head scratching and swear words. So there's the first LED poked in that hole and the wires run through the channel, sticking out the side. And you can see what I meant now with the masking tape. Just sort of cover that channel so that the wires can't pull out. So it might not be the prettiest, but there you go then. Our LEDs are now in their respective sockets. And you can see I've got a bit of tape on each sort of channel so that if you do pull the wires by accident, they don't go anywhere. And that's just a little thing that I've learned over the years. So what you want to do now is obviously test them to make sure they still work because you've been poking and prodding them. So if, like me, you have a Fluke multimeter, you can set it to the diode mode here. So you'll see there. And then you can go with your leads onto the red and black of each LED and you can individually test them. So I don't know if I'll actually be able to do it one hand. I very much doubt it. That should be one, almost. Bear with. This is probably the fiddliest thing you could try and do with one hand. There you go. There's the bottom center one. So that just shows you. And you can test all the individual LEDs to your heart's content and you won't blow them with the multimeter because I think it's only a 3-volt output, if that. It's very low power, so it's a good way of just checking that you've got no shorts and that you've not gone through any of the wires. So do that on all three. When you're happy, then obviously we'll move on to the next step. So what is the next step then? Well, as long as you're all happy with this, you need somewhere to run the wires. So the best place I've found on this is to run the wires along the back here. If I get this down, I'll just show you. So you want to go across the back, and you want to leave a little bit of slack and then across till you get to around here. So to get to that point, you need another small hole, which is in this corner here. And to help it also guide the wires round, you want the hole to go at an angle. So again, I use the soldering iron for this. So I get the soldering iron. It's probably a bit difficult to hold the camera while I do this, but then I'll go through just like this until I've got a hole, and then that's our hole there that the wire's going to travel through. And then I'll get the soldering iron and I'll just, obviously making sure the wires are out of the way enough, I'll just come in at an angle and push into that hole, and that will create like a 45-degree sort of setup. And then again, once you've done that, obviously clean off the excess with your Stanley blade, and that will give you a nice sort of route for your cables to go through. So you can see what I mean now, just gone at an angle, because you can see that the route the wires want to take, it keeps it a bit flatter. So yeah, you want to go across this back edge, and what I do now is get some more of the masking tape and just go over, make sure it's nice and tight, and that just secures these wires in place. I'll just do that quickly and then I'll show you what I mean. So here's the wires run through the underneath of the seating unit. You can see there, they all run through here. They get to this point and then they split off. I've got the negatives, so the black wires, they go straight on down here and they come through the hole in the floor. The red positive wires across here, another little bit of tape just to secure it, and then do another U-turn and then another bit of tape there, and they come out facing the front again. Now this is because I will fit a set of resistors in the floor of the chassis around here. So when you put this back on, what will happen is the end of these wires will be on that resistor. They will then, when you put the body shell on, spin around that way in a loop, and that will allow you to lift this off if ever you need to, and it will give you a little bit of slack. So you can skip this bit, but for the sake of it, you might as well do this. It just basically gives you a loop so that if you ever need, you can pull this off and you've got probably that much room to just slide that to one side in case you ever want to add any more lights. So make sure you future-proof your work. Now, if you have got this far, then first of all, well done. Second of all, I must apologise for my very boring voice, so I salute you for sticking with it. So don't give up just yet. We're not doing too bad, and hopefully not too long to go. So here are the resistors I use. It's a small little resistor board with 3 separate 1000 ohm resistors on, and I think you can get these from Lay's ready-made. But these are made by my friend Alan. He just chucked them together for me ages ago. I mean, I could probably quite easily do them myself, but I was lazy. But yeah, you can see I've got 3 separate ones. So what I'll do now is I'll run a single wire from the V positive, which is there, run that down, and then I'll strip it back so that the exposed piece of the wire is long enough just to run across all 3 of these terminals. So you could, if you wanted, in theory, run one separate wire from each of these back to here, but then you're just tripling the wires for the sake of it. So I'll show you what I mean when that's done. But then as well as that, we obviously have 3 separate resistors, like I say. So all of the red wires off of those headlamps we'll put on one of these, and the red wires from the tail lamps we'll put on another one, and then the third one I'm going to leave it just blank at the minute, and then at some point I will fit a cab light. So same method as before, I fitted that bottom left hand LED now in this corner, and I've drilled 2 1mm holes in each corner, obviously mining out for the wires. They will go just under where the tail lights come, so I'll poke the wires through and then I'll glue the LEDs into the back of the tail lamp holes. So well done, you've made it this far and gone through a lot of masking tape. So just to run through, so we've got the 3 headlamps in the seating part of the chassis. Wires run along here. The positive is in a big loop, and as you can see, the theory works. So this is now attached to the center resistor, and obviously, as you can see, it gives you enough slack where you can put this unit down next to the main chassis part. The negatives for these 3 are carrying on straight, and there's enough slack on those to go through this hole and connect onto the decoder board. We've got the single bottom left white lamp, which the wires come out here and then snake around, and then they go down here and onto the same resistor as the other 3. So you can see that. That's a bit fiddly to do, putting them all on one. So I would suggest for you to solder the ends of all of the red wires together for the headlamps, and then it will make life a little bit easier to put them all on in one go rather than doing them individually. We've got the reds in the holes for the tail lamps. They come up through the little 1mm holes in the chassis. Again, they follow the same path, bit of tape, and they then go onto this resistor here. Doesn't matter what order you get them in, as long as you've got the reds on one, the whites on the other. Don't put the whites and reds on the same resistor, because you'll turn them on and only the reds will illuminate. Again, we've got one resistor there free for when I eventually get around to putting a cab light in, so that'll again be separate. And coming off the resistor board on the other side, you can see there we've got this blue wire which will go to the V part of the decoder socket board. That, as I said earlier, I've stripped back enough so that that will go across all three terminals to link them all together, so you've only got to run a single wire. The negatives on this side, obviously we've got one for this white lamp, and then we've got two more for each individual tail lamp. What I did is I chopped the end off of both wires which go to the white, so it saves me messing around getting the fluke out. So I can see that that one there is chopped off, so that is the negative for the white wire. So that's the one that I will cut to length first and attach to the board. But yeah, you can see now we've got enough slack in there. We can put it all back together, put the seating unit back on the top and feed this board through the hole, as well as all the wires, screw it down, and then once that is all in place, we'll solder all of these onto the board and I'll show you where they'll go. Right, so the seating unit's back on, it's all screwed in. You can see I've just used a bit of tape just to secure all of these wires out of the way while I put this in. So tape really is your best mate with this job. We've got the blue wire hanging out here. The socket is now screwed in place, and just make sure when you are putting this back together, you just double check underneath that that red wire that sort of loops around isn't snagged on anything, and that the bogie can still rotate. Nothing wrong with that, so you should be all good. So what happens now? Right, well, we've got to strip back the relevant wires and solder them in the right place. So as I said before, V is where your wire wants to go that feeds the resistor board. So that is the power for all your positive connections. So that is where this blue wire will go onto. So obviously you'll cut it down, blue wire on the V terminal. As for the others, so F0 front is where I will put the center LED. And then F0 rear is for both tail lamps. So you'll have two wires on F0 rear. And then F0 front will have the one wire, which is for the center LED. Again, to find out which one is which, you can get your multimeter, or fluke, whatever you want to call it, and you put the red on the V once you've obviously wired this in, or put it straight on the end of here. And then the black probe, you will put that on each individual one of these wires, and whichever one lights up, you'll know that that wire is for that LED. So to find the center one, as I say, red on the positive and then black on each negative until you find the center one. So yeah, center, you want F0 front, and then you go from there basically. So you can see we have got the positive for the resistors wired in, we have got the tail lamps wired in, we've got the front center headlamp wired in. Now the next part is as difficult as you want to make it. Basically you have the option, you've got three wires here, which obviously are for the other three headlamps. It's up to you how you want to do this, but the decoder, bear in mind, if you are using the underground sound file, this is how I've set it up for you all. So aux 5 is for the top left lamp, aux 6 is for the top right, aux 7 is for the bottom left, and aux 8 is for the bottom right. Obviously I haven't used the bottom right because I'm not going to light it. So that's if you want to be able to control all the head codes individually and make up your own sort of combinations. So they'll all have their own function button for each individual lamp, so you can turn on whatever combination you want. However, if you just want it basic, so you want them all lit at once, then simply wire them all to F0. Or if you want, say, the top two lit at the same time, you can put them on F0. You can put any combination you want. But that is the setup that I have done on the decoder, just to give you the most play value, so that if you was to say have more than one of these, you can have two different head codes on two different trains, or, well, in fact, you could have a different head code at each end of each train. There's multiple combinations that you can have, and they do all mean different things. Back in the day, they meant different destinations depending on what head code you had. So again, like I say, it's completely up to you whether you follow this or whether you just wire everything to F0 or not. But yeah, so F5, 6, 7 and 8 are the alternate headlight combinations. And there we go, we are now finished. You can see our friend Mr. Masking Tape has just helped out one final time. And where I have soldered these wires on, I've just gone up the middle and then across, just to leave that little bit of slack, just in case you cut the wire slightly too short. So that just gives you a little bit of leeway, and it stops the wires all being obviously a bit sort of stretched out and any snags from ripping them off. The masking tape also will keep them nice and flat, as you can see. So when you go ahead and put your decoder back on, like so, they're not too noticeable. I mean, if you really want, you could paint them black, paint the masking tape black, sorry. But realistically, I mean, Bachmann haven't exactly tried to hide the decoder setup, have they? So who knows? I'll leave that up to you. But yeah, now it's a simple case of, because we haven't got any wires dangling off of the body, it should be as simple as pop the body on, away you go. And chuck it on your tester of choice. However you want to test this is, again, up to you. I have a lock programmer, so I'll use that. But the only thing left to do is you want to paint the inside of the body shell black, matte black, just around where the lights are to stop any light bleed. You probably want to do the same where the lights are actually housed in the body, the chassis itself. And then you just want to come along with a little dab of glue and glaze in each of the holes, and that will form your lens. So ignore the fact that I haven't yet done the glue and glaze for the lenses, so they might look a bit strange. But F0, center lamp, F24, top left, F25, top right, F26, bottom left. And if we had fitted a lamp on the bottom right, it would be on F27. So as I say, you can press F0, then you can put any sort of combination you want on. See there. Or you could even turn F0 off if you don't want the center. Another thing you can do with the file to save messing about going through every single function to put all the lights on, you can simply press F11 to put all the alternate lights on at once. And obviously you can have that with the center light if you want. So F0 is always the center. But yeah, there you go. We've got loads of combinations there. And before I forget, the tail lamps also work. Again, they don't have lenses yet. We need to chuck some glue and glaze in the holes, and then they should be spot on. So well done for making it to the end of this video. Sorry it's a bit long-winded, but you know how these things are. It does take a while to do this sort of stuff. But it just goes to show it's not too complicated. It's just getting all the right stuff in the right places and sort of working out the best method of doing it. I mean, there are different ways to do it. That's just the way that I found is the easiest, and it also is the easiest for if you ever want to take it apart again, because that can be a bit of an Achilles heel with fitting lights and stuff, is getting it back apart in case you want to change something. So this method has proved very useful for me over time. But let me know if it's helped you out, if you're doing this job to your own. Fingers crossed it helps you all. And let me know if there's more of this sort of stuff you'd like to see in the future. But as for now, thanks for watching. I'll see you again soon, and bye for now.